how does HR become a key enabler for the business? People are actually a very strong strategic investment for the organization.
How do we make sure that anybody who joins us is understanding the culture and is assimilated extremely well within the organization? Learning by either experience, learning by exposure, and learning because of the ecosystem or environment.
The buzzword of today's time and age, AI. Do you see AI replacing people? Very provocative question. Welcome to another episode of Water Delivery. Today, we are going to be talking about a very interesting topic, which is human capital, the force which drives organizations. As a finance professional, numbers are meaningless if it is not backed by the people which are driving it. As far as today's topic is, it is about people, process, and performance. And who better to join us? Seema Nair, our CHRO for Flipkart. We're going to be talking about how people and culture are ultimate modes of competitive advantage. Welcome to the show, Seema.
Thank you. Very happy to be here, Ravi.
So as we get started, Seema, one of the more, let's say, start framework is how does HR become a key enabler for the business? HR has historically been known as, a rule enforcer, a benefit provider, or a rewards, or a payroll manager. How are they really enabling businesses in today's time and age?
Yeah. So, Ravi, if we go back a little bit in time, I think the world of HR, it was at a point in time called industrial relations or personal management, actually started in the 19th century with the Industrial Revolution. Obviously, we are a long way away from that. And I think every single organization, right, that aspires to be doing well from a business sustainability perspective going forward, treats their human resources extremely differently. Largely, right, in today's day and age, whether it's HR, whether it's finance, whether it's any other corporate functions, together we all are here to achieve the common goal, which is to meet business growth, profitability, and continue to build the business for the long run. In parallel with that, if you take a look at the goals of the HR function, it's about ensuring that employees feel that their capabilities are utilized, that their capabilities are continuously growing. As a result, their performance is getting better and better. They're continuing to grow in their career. They're getting rewarded for the same. So if you take a look at that, right, and draw a Venn diagram across these two, there are many common things. The business growth enables employee growth, and employee growth, and all of these different things enables the business. And so the work of HR largely is how do you bring these two common objectives closer and closer together.
And that's a very fair point. Seema, one of the elements that I kind of keep reinforcing is that people are actually a very strong strategic investments for the organization. Identifying the right person for the right job, and at the same time, competency being very crucial. For example, in, let's say, multiple areas, be it supply chain, technology, marketing, you need the right person driving the right business domain or functional domain for that. And organizations typically have started creating rigid structures. How have you seen this evolution where even, let's say, in Flipkart, we moved to a more skill-based organization and moving away from rigid structure frameworks?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Ravi. And I think in many organizations now this journey has started or has very recently been completed. So also at Flipkart. If you think about it, the traditional way of evaluating somebody was to say, okay, do they have a degree from ABC Institute, or do they have X years of experience in ABC kind of organizations, and that sort of stood as a replacement for how do you evaluate the capability that the person brings to the table. But fundamentally, the ability to focus on skills to signify what does the job skill require, be it a domain technical functional skill set or a soft skill set, right? I mean, the people skills that I talked about, or leadership skills, people managerial skills, and so on. And if you're able to sift through that and say, okay, this is what the human brings to the table, and identify both the job skills as well as the person's skill sets, it becomes far easier, far more quality of hiring, quality in terms of when we're having promotion discussions, career matching discussions. For example, where can this person become a successor in the future? What are the careers can this person go to? And also in terms of growth, right? So the accuracy of that information becomes far, far sharper. It's much more easier to take those decisions and to rely on those decisions.
Got it. And staying on that point on skills, obviously, building skills is a very important aspect, and a key component of that is how does learning and development become a very crucial facet of the organizations. I remember in my prior organization, at least, that it was mandatory to do a lot of L&D, and that time, of course, the digital age was not fully there; it was more traditional. But definitely spending a week, 10 days in multiple sessions or webinars or seminars of that nature. How does L&D become a key component of the skill-based framework?
Yeah, thank you. And it's a fascinating topic for me. It's a topic that I have deep love and interest for. So when we take a look at some of the changes we've done, especially in the last year or so at Flipkart, we've deepened our investment in two different focus areas. One is creating domain-based learning academies, largely across most of our business functions. The intent there being that you have experts from the business themselves advising talent within that particular function on where they can deepen their capability in those respective domains. For example, the One Tech Academy or the CDO Academy, right? On the other hand, you also have common horizontal areas of focus, and you mentioned mandatory learning already. That continues to remain important. The refresh of that knowledge continues to remain important. But beyond that, when we take a look at the common basics that we expect the central academy within
Mhm.
Flipkart to deliver, it's around new hire learning. How do we make sure that anybody who joins us is uh, capable of delivering to their role requirements within the first 0 to 90 days, is understanding the culture and is assimilated extremely well within the organization. The next focus area over there is around people management. Once again, a very rigorous curriculum to make sure that whoever is aspiring to become a people manager, be they newly promoted or new hires, or else they're managers of managers and so on, they understand what the specific expectations are and are able to fulfill those. Again, Leadership Academy is another one that we have where at a certain level and above, we focus on building those leadership capabilities that we want. And by the way, we are known to be a leadership factory. We have a massive amount of
True.
flipsters, right? Leading their own businesses both internally as well as externally. Uh, Also, soft skills, of course, right? Very, very critical no matter what job role you're in. Those never really go away, as I mentioned earlier, right? So there is a huge amount of richness in terms of the curriculum, in terms of the focus. In fact, this year we've deepened our investment by offering Coursera to also one of the foremost content libraries, and we have been actually recognized by Coursera for the fastest uptake
Hmm.
across the whole world, right? In any organization that they have seen. As a result of all of this work, we've actually doubled the learning hours that people have seen this year on average within Flipkart compared to last year.
What would your advice be to generally a lot of the younger companies or startup ecosystem players? Because obviously Flipkart had its own evolution, and as you said, learning academies and a lot of thought process, which is a much stronger people framework in place. But how do you? What kind of advice would you give them to make L&D still a part of their day-to-day business? Because many a times ability to spend time or carving out time becomes difficult. So in general, what would be some of your few nuggets for the
Yes.
larger
So if
ecosystem?
it's a smaller startup, right? First of all, we know that in many cases, descriptions may not be so tight or so rigid. Chances are the person is doing a lot more than what a traditional job description in a larger organization could look like. Now, there's also this concept of 3 or 4E within learning, which is learning by education, which is could be classroom or online digital learning. The other is learning by either experience, learning by exposure, and learning because of the ecosystem or environment.
Mhm.
And for startups, more than just purely education based, I would say the other three become extremely rich. And so to not dismiss the fact that they're actually learning through experience,
Mm,
exposure, as
mm,
well as
mm.
the ecosystem, right? And still to have some amount of time for reflection of what skills have you built and where do you want to go from here.
No, that's very helpful, Seema, and I hope for the audience it's very useful as well. And changing tracks slightly here, the buzzword of today's time and age, AI. Uh, do you see AI replacing people? Very provocative question.
Uh, so the first honest answer that I would give is to exhort everybody to invest and to sort of lean in. And the reason for that is because AI can be a fabulous tool if one is using it to augment oneself. Uh, in fact, I've myself found that in my day-to-day job, right, every time I lean into AI, Some of the answers are fabulous. Of course, there's always the risks around hallucination, and we all know that.
True.
But the speed at which you get information, and especially synthesis of information from all kinds of sources, is absolutely fabulous. And no matter what the job is, right, there's always ways to augment. So I would actually say it's time to lean in, it's time to learn, it's time to invest for everybody out there, and to see that the richness of the job, right? I mean, the rote aspects hopefully go away. In fact, we're also investing a lot in terms of automation, in terms of AI, not just within HR, across the rest of the organization as well. The expectation is that some of the work that we honestly, most of us don't like, right? That goes away. It becomes a productivity enhancer for all of us.
No, that's very interesting to note, because normally the feeling always is that AI is going to replace people, but I think the interesting frame is, how do you embrace AI so that it helps you with better productivity, or it helps you with better quality of learning, development, and all together. Organizations over a period of time tend to get bureaucratic. I mean, or for a better word, bureaucracy becomes an evil for progress. What are your views in terms of building an organization, say in case of Flipkart, to build it in a more non-layered, low bureaucracy organization?
So whether it's Flipkart or elsewhere, I think it's extremely important that jobs become enriched, that the person is not playing within a very narrow span, right? That he or she is doing much more, and that's where the uniqueness and the richness of the job comes in. In order to do that, it's extremely important that spans, for example, right, for people managers are enlarged within a reasonable limit, of course, so that there's ability to have supervision. But at the same time, how are we reducing layers, right, within the organization? And I'm talking about reporting layers here, so that all the way from the very top of the organization, all the way down to the lowest level, right, that there is more opportunity for collaboration, for communication to flow both ways, and horizontally, right, within the organization. I think so. Spans and layers are definitely massive levers in order to do that. But outside of that also, right, ability to create moments where many different teams can come together. Now, whether it's in the form of an expo, whether it's in the form of a conference, whether it's in the form of just having flow walks, whether it's in the form of a team, basically, right, getting others to come in and understand what they're doing. I think those are moments where the ability to understand the other, and then to find deeper ways to partner, deeper ways to collaborate, and to create something new and to
True.
create something unique, right, becomes extremely important. So I think it's the formal structure that one can work through, and then how do you create these moments, right, which are not the formal structure but more related to culture, right? How do you create all of those moments? I think one can be very, very careful and thoughtful around all of these.
And just staying on the point of culture, such an important word, and also to kind of you know not just preach but also participate in it in a very aggressive or in a very regular manner. Spending a moment on culture, having the right work environment or having the right work culture is what is where people thrive. How do you ensure that you continue to foster a great culture? Because retention of talent is also a key element of it, and while there will be obviously other reward frameworks which would entice individuals, but having the right work environment helps preserve that. So what are some of your thoughts on that
Yeah.
area?
So thanks, Ravi, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well, given the amount of time you've spent within the organization. But first, a few of mine. Uh, I think culture is, sometimes there are microcultures based on the nature of the or personality of the manager or the leader you work with. Also based on the nature of the business function itself. For example, within Flipkart, one tech will probably have a different culture, supply chain will probably have a different culture, CDO
True.
organizations, right, or gov functions, especially if they're more on the governance side of the house. There could be different microcultures within the organization. But I think it's extremely important to clarify what is the common minimum that we are expecting from everybody. For example, at Flipkart, we talk about ABC and I2, right? Which is audacity, bias for action. We talk about customer focus, and of course, integrity as well as inclusion. Um, if people understand what this really means, and what I love or what I find fascinating about Flipkart is these are not as much on conference room walls, right? As much as we actually see them live, in the sense that people talk about these, whether we are hiring, whether we are promoting, whether we are evaluating performance and so on. We actually talk about these terms come into our daily usage. So I think it's extremely important that it's lived,
Mhm.
and it's not just written about or just spoken about, right, in that sense. Also, I think it's very important that people understand at a certain threshold, right? You don't want to go below a certain threshold in terms of common behavior, that when
True.
you're joining this organization, right, this is what I can expect. And I think that's extremely important, especially as you're looking to attract and retain the best talent that's available to us around the world.
And how do you really manage this? Because obviously there are people coming from different walks of life. They're coming from different individual cultures or different companies which have had their own work cultures. How do you preserve the Flipkart culture? In this case, more specifically Flipkart, because
Yeah.
just want to understand that.
Sure. I think there is an element for diversity and inclusion, right? And when I say diversity and inclusion, I'm talking about different mindsets, different opinions. I think it's the richness of that that enables us to deliver to the richness of the customer base that we have. I mean, we have customer base that's coming from all over different walks of life. It's tier one all the way down to tier three, different parts of the country, and so on, right? So the ability to assimilate people from different cultures well within the organization, and at the same time have that common minimum, I
Right.
think is extremely important. But how do you give ability for different people to express those opinions and to make the final goal, right, achievable, even though they might have diversity of thought? I think it becomes extremely important.
That's very helpful, Seema. And since you mentioned about my own experience, yeah, I think 12 years in Flipkart, and possibly day one when I joined, I was flummoxed to say that wow, like where did I join? Because it was a lot of youngsters, it was a lot of agility, and at the same time a lot of madness, for lack of a better word. But there was some kind of harmony in that madness, and that's what allowed me to continue the journey over the last several years. In terms of what excites me on that paradigm, I think the 12 years here, I would say, is close to 25 years in any other organizations. Possibly I've aged more, maybe lost a lot more hair, but I think it's been a very interesting ride. Every day solving for consumer problems, every day executing to the T, figuring out how you grow existing businesses, how do you gestate and start new businesses. All in all, the camaraderie of people, of coming together, be it for specific events like a big billion days, or even for any other launches. It's just the bonhomie that's there in the group, which is what keeps us chugging. So I think, yeah, that's in a nutshell.
Thank you, Ravi. That's amazing to hear. In fact, the word that comes to mind is vibrancy.
Yeah.
Right.
This has been super, and I think that's a wrap to our show. Thanks once again, Seema, for taking time, and I think it was very helpful. I hope the audience would appreciate, in general, a lot of the HR as well as people elements that you've been able to cover for the larger ecosystem, and of course, look forward to more episodes in future.
Thank
Thank you.
you for having me on this podcast, Ravi. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.